guys, I'm going a bit rogue and I'm ripping out some of my fruit trees. I know I've been saying this for a long time that I was going to do some changes to this back food forest style garden, but it's so hard when it looks lush and it's full of fruit and it's covering my back fence to then rip it out. But now that the weather is cooler, my mulberry is asleep and things are looking a little bit ratty, it was a little bit easier for me to commit and start ripping these trees out. To start with, I have pruned back some of the weird misshaped branches, and then removing the star picket, which was used to help hold it up when it was a little tree, was actually one of the hardest parts of this job, but nothing a pair of red bands can't fix. And then set about trying to dig it up. So when you're transplanting a fruit tree, you do want to try and preserve as much of the roots as possible and come in at an angle to keep those feeder roots that are shallow on the surface alive. So this tree is about 9 years old now at this point since I first planted it. So it has a decent sized root system, but it was easy enough to cut them with these loppers once I located the main roots, and then it lifted out pretty easy after that. Strawberry guavas are really hardy, so I'm not afraid to give it an extra prune of the roots, and then I'm going to give it an even bigger prune of the leaves, because if you're going to take off about a third or more of the root system, you're going to want to take that off the leaf or the canopy as well, so that it has enough energy to feed itself. This was the biggest pot I could find. Obviously, if I had a bigger pot, that would have been more ideal, but I'm just using what I have, which is this pot. So I did need to give the roots extra pruning to fit it in the pot, but I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a really nice shade tree for my potted fruit tree section and still produce a whole lot of fruit. Day and another fruit tree to come out. I did not anticipate this to be such a hard job, but I'm glad that I did the strawberry guava first because the white mulberry was a whole lot harder. Obviously, removing fruit trees is not something you want to do all the time, but when you have a limited amount of space, you want to make sure that you love everything that you're growing. And I've had a good run with this mulberry. I grew it from a cutting, it cost me nothing, I've harvested fruit off it, I've made cuttings from it, it's provided shade for my other garden to get established, so it's done a really good job, and it's not going to go to waste. The roots on the white mulberry were a lot larger and a lot harder to get out, and ended up having to use an electrical saw to cut through the main roots to be able to get it out. But over a course of 2 days, I finally got it out. And as much as I wanted to just call it a day and get to the fun part of planting new trees, I had to make sure that I utilized as much of this mulberry as I can, because I didn't want anything to go to waste. It's amazing that from one cutting I've been able to create hundreds of trees. To make mulberry cuttings, I strip off the leaves and I just pull down against the branch with a pair of gloves on and put all the leaves in a pile to later use as mulch. Then I cut up the pieces into about 6 nodes, and a node is where the leaf was, so you can see a little bud or a little break where the leaf was on. I mainly take cuttings from branches that are about the same size or thickness as a pencil, and I remove any of the green young wood. So I'm just using the semi-hardwood, and then the really thick branches I can either use as stakes to hold up other plants or mulch them. Make sure when you're doing the cuttings you lay them all in the same direction so that they are facing, with the bud facing upwards, and that way when you put them in a bucket of water or in the ground, you know which way is the right way up. I like to do my cuttings first in some water, so I'm just putting them all in a bucket of water for a few weeks to stimulate the root growth, and then I'll plant them all in the same pot or the same garden bed until they establish some roots and some new growth over the springtime. That way I'm not taking up hundreds of pots by planting them individually. I can just plant them all in one spot a few inches apart. And now comes the fun part. I get to plant some new fruit trees, so it makes all the hard work worth it. Can we just take a little minute for the colour of my soil? This is just from me doing so much chop and drop, from always having a ground cover and building up layers and layers of soil. This used to just be pure dry sand, and now it's quite rich and dark. First up, I'm planting a avocado. So this is the Pinkerton avocado, which is a little bit more on the smaller side of the avocado trees. It's kind of like a semi-dwarf, so it's not going to get too large, hopefully. It's already quite mature and branching off really low, so that's going to help keep it a smaller tree as well. That soil that I'm adding is an azalea mix, and whenever I plant a new fruit tree, I have started putting this in because it is a lower pH, and my soil and my water are quite high pH, so it just helps balance it out overall. And I'm also planting a banana. This is the Pacific plantain banana, and that's going to be great for using both as sweet eating or as green bananas. It's also going to provide me with lots of green material and chop and drop for feeding the rest of this garden. And if the space ever does get too crowded once the avocado matures, then I can just move pups to other areas of the garden and take out the bananas altogether. The Queensland arrowroot, which I've been growing in sort of my medium layers of my food forest, I've chopped down to make space, but this was also going to feed and nourish the new trees. Plus, there was more rhizomes in the ground, so they'll just pop up again to help provide shade over the summer months. The third plant next to the banana is a dwarf Parma mango. We planted that already a little while ago because I knew that I was going to be replacing the mulberry, so it's already there growing on. And of course, all of these leaves from the mulberry are going to be used as mulch to break down and feed the soil. I am going to top it up with a bit of extra mulch because I have it on hand, and this is the Triple C with the chicken, corn and canola to add a bit of nitrogen in there. I don't necessarily do the same thing every time. I'm often just using what I have on hand or what I've already got, but always trying to build up those layers and keep the soil covered. I feel like this is a good reminder that sometimes we have to go backwards to go forwards, because my garden is looking very empty right now. Pruning back my feijoas by at least half and using all of that as mulch, which is one of my favourite things to do. My feijoas are playing a really vital part in my garden. They're one of my top producers of fruit. They're also one of my top producers in mulch, so they help feed the rest of the garden. This driveway patch has always been a bit of a temporary thing where I had leftover soil and I started growing pumpkins in it. But when you have a digger sitting in your driveway, how can you not use it? So this is a driveway, so it's super compacted. I can't dig down, but a digger can dig down. And so we loosened up the soil. I say we also very loosely. So by cutting through that compact ground, it is now down to sand underneath, and I can actually plant some fruit trees. This space doesn't get a lot of sun in the wintertime, but in the summer it's pretty hot. So I've decided to plant stone fruit here, which are deciduous, which means they are asleep during winter, they don't need the sun. And then during summer they'll be covered in leaves, and because I'm planting quite closely, they'll all shade and protect each other. Fingers crossed. It's a little bit low, I know, but I scored this off Marketplace, and so this is going to be my kiwi fruit arbor. So I have a male kiwi fruit planted here, and then I have two females, so fingers crossed they survive. And then in the corner here I have my compost bin, and it's just really handy having a compost bin out the front of the house so that if I am picking leaves and things like that, I can chuck it in here and I don't have to then move it out the back to the other compost. So this one here is the Tropic Sensation Nectarine. This one is really low chill, so it's going to be good for our climate here in WA, where we get a really warm winter and not a lot of chill hours. So we've got the nectarine, I've got a cherry, and this is the double graft. This is the low chill cherry, which is the mini royal and the royal crimson. So two different ones on one plant. My first time growing cherries, it wasn't really on my list, but when I was looking at some different stone fruit to put here, I thought I'd give it a go. Over this side I have my second apricot. So I have one apricot in a pot, and now I've got a second one. I love apricots. This is the Fireball. It's a dwarf variety, so it's not going to get huge, and I can keep it well pruned. And then the last one on the end is my apple. This is my red fleshed apple, and I had this growing in a pot. So it's been here for a year in a pot, and now I found a home for it in the ground. So it does need a pollinator, and I have got a few others to go in the ground. I just don't know where I'm going to put them, so they'll probably have to go out there in the other garden. Oh look, there's even like a little broccoli or something. Brassica, yeah. So many self-seeded things. Hopefully some of these tomatoes make it up. That would be good. And down the back here in the very last corner, I've got one of my tamarillos that I grew from seed. So I have a few of these planted around the place, and they're looking really good. Tamarillos like sheltered spots, and they don't mind a bit of shade being an understory plant. So this little corner should be a good spot.